Sometime during childhood, a female with autistic traits will begin to know that she's different compared to her peers, and due to adopting an alternative persona, she may begin to have problems of self-identity and low self-esteem. Also, due to observing and analyzing social behavior and trying not to make a social error, she may become emotionally exhausted. Researchers suggest that autism stems from a reduced ability to make predictions, leading to anxiety. In other words, autism may be rooted in an impaired ability to predict events and other people's actions. From the perspective of the autistic individual, the world appears to be a very chaotic rather than an orderly place because events seem to occur randomly and unpredictably. So in this view, autistic symptoms, such as repetitive behaviors and an insistence on a highly structured environment, are coping strategies to help deal with this unpredictable world. Okay, quick little story for you. There was this park, and there was a little walkway where people would always go by, and there was a duck that hung out right in this particular spot all the time. His name was Pete. Everybody that walked that pathway in that park knew Pete. He was always in that one location. And so one morning, there's a lady walking by, and she was a singer. She loved to sing, and Pete comes up, approaches her, quack, 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 quack. And the lady goes, "Oh, Pete, thanks for singing me a song this morning. How sweet." Then there's another lady comes along, and she's kind of heavy set. She's sauntering along there, and she looks over at Pete, and she goes, "Pete, you're getting very chunky. You need to stop begging for food." She moves on. Then there's another lady that comes along. She was on the receiving end of child abuse, and she grew up and just kind of viewed herself as a victim of life in general. Pete approaches this lady. Quack, quack, quack. The lady goes, "Don't you dare think about attacking me. I'll call animal control and have them come out and remove you from the park." Then there was another lady walking by. She tended to try to find the good in people, always kind of positively viewing things. So she's walking down. Pete comes up, quack, quack, quack. She goes, "Oh, hi, Pete. Come here, let me pat you on the head." And the lady gave him a little pat on the head. All four of these people were projecting their issues onto Pete. Pete was just Pete. He wasn't good, bad, right or wrong, fair, unfair. He was just a duck. Your autistic spouse is not good, bad, right, wrong, fair, unfair. He's just somebody who has a developmental disorder. Got a question from a neurotypical wife, and she states that my husband has ASD level 1 and he has some emotions blindness or alexithymia. Can he feel love? The answer is yes. It's going to be harder for him to find the words to describe how he feels, and it's going to be easier for people with ASD to show love through actions, in other words, doing things for you. But alexithymia, even though it effectively isolates a person with ASD emotionally, it does not prevent him from feeling and showing love. So you want to do something transformative today, and with respect to your neurodiverse marriage, be more concerned about giving today. Just let it be an 18-hour experiment. I'm going to be more concerned with giving than getting or avoiding. I'm not going to concern myself today with what I can get from my spouse. I'm not going to be concerned today about the things that they say or do that's unwanted that I need to avoid. No, I'm not going to concern myself with getting or avoiding, only giving. Do that as an experiment today and watch how transformative it will be. So in other words, you're denying the ego self, but you're promoting your spiritual self. When your autistic spouse is calm, his or her emotional age will match his or her chronological age. But when your autistic spouse is stressed, he or she will regress to preteen, sometimes older childhood. In other words, you may have a 38-year-old spouse who emotionally now is operating more like a 12-year-old. So there is regression in ASD when the person is anxious. If you're married to somebody with autism, you're married to somebody who has a disorder. Yes, it's a disorder. It's not a condition or a different way of thinking, okay? If you had a child with a disorder, would you treat that child the same way you do your autistic spouse? Huh? Would you? So I got a question from somebody the other day. He wanted to know, how can I become autistic? Because I hear that autistic people are very smart and they've got a lot going for them, you know, like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and so on. Okay, so you want the recipe for autism? First of all, get you a cell phone. Then find something that you are passionate about that you can find on your cell phone, a special interest, like video games, maybe social media, and so on. And then you hyper-focus on that. You're on your phone basically all the time. And you hyper-focus on that for extended periods of time to the exclusion of everything else. Give that about 6 months, and you, too, will become autistic. So here's a quick rundown on the executive function deficits that people on the autism spectrum will experience. They won't have all of these, but they'll have more than one. Difficulty understanding non-literal language and nonverbal communication. Difficulty controlling escalating emotions. Getting started on undesirable tasks that are usually of a social nature or something outside of their special interest. Difficulty carrying out more than one cognitive process at a time. Difficulty planning and organizing. Number 6, difficulty recognizing when change is needed and noticing when a social error occurs. Difficulty shifting focus or attention from a desirable activity to an undesirable activity. And working memory deficits. In other words, difficulty identifying the main point, taking all information into account, seeing the big picture, difficulty with reading comprehension and following instructions. All of that is under the umbrella of working memory deficit. Now, one of the executive functions that people on the autism spectrum are very good at is called inhibition. That's the ability to contain the desire to do something in order to stay on task until it's finished. So one of their greatest assets is they can stay highly focused for extended periods of time on one thing. Hey guys, this is Mark. Quick message to neurotypical spouses out there. If you have an autistic spouse, then you have a spouse who is an overthinker. In other words, sometimes he is overly logical. What does that look like? He overanalyzes things. In other words, he spends so much time combing over every little detail that he has a hard time initiating a task, sometimes procrastinating for weeks or months, sometimes never getting started on the task at all. Another characteristic of an overly logical brain is he's super critical of himself and you. He's going to be hard to please because he's very much a perfectionist. He's going to tend to be very pessimistic and skeptical of your ideas and your opinions and your view on things, and he's going to have a hard time seeing the big picture. In other words, he's going to hyper-focus on one little detail to the exclusion of others. So, a quick message to neurotypical wives. If you're married to an autistic husband, he's likely to have an underdeveloped emotional brain, but an overdeveloped logical brain, which means he will be engaged in overanalysis, getting stuck in a thought, rumination, hyper-focusing on only one detail of something, and inaction. What does inaction look like? Well, instead of ready, aim, fire, inaction looks like ready, aim, 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 aim some more, aim, keep aiming, aim, 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 aim. Quick message to neurotypical spouses out there. If you're married to someone with autism, think of his meltdowns as the fight part of the fight or flight response, and think of his shutdowns as the flight part of the fight or flight response. In other words, your autistic spouse is trying to protect himself from real or imagined harm. Quick message to spouses with autism. When you have a meltdown, you blow off a lot of pent-up energy, and you can be fine 5 minutes later, but guess what? Your wife and the kids, if they were there too, it takes them 5 days to recover from your meltdown. Quick message to neurodiverse couples. You have made your spouse guilty, someone who's deserving of punishment, and you've gone about punishing them in your own unique way. And you have held on to treasured wounds for how many decades? As if they're little golden nuggets. Quick message to neurodiverse couples. Do you want to be right or have a resentment-free marriage? I said, do you want to be right or have a resentment-free marriage? They're mutually exclusive categories. You can't have both. You know, you're a spirit in a physical body, and when everything is said and done, your physical body will be nothing but dust, and your spirit will be nothing but eternal love. So the troubles that you're going through right now, fairly insignificant in the overall scheme of things. Quick tip to neurodiverse couples. Your spouse is not here to make you happy, okay? Your happiness is your job, and it's not given freely. It has to be earned. How do you earn it? You got to start giving the thing that you want to get. That's how the universe works. I often hear from neurodiverse couples, and they'll say, I'm so disillusioned with this neurodiverse marriage. I can't change my partner. Congratulations. It's good that you're disillusioned, because that means you were living an illusion that you could change your partner, and now you're not living that illusion anymore. You're disillusioned. Congratulations. Hey guys, this is Mark, and I had an interesting question, and the question was, in essence, what do I try to achieve in therapy when I work with neurodiverse couples online? I do have an overarching goal, and I'm going to share my screen right now. One of my first goals in working with, usually it's the ASD husband and the NT wife, and working with them online is to educate both parties about the traits of the disorder that cause problems in the marriage. That's the first step. And then the next three things are reframes. So step 2 is I reframe the traits of ASD as manifestations of a brain that is not fully developed emotionally, instead of viewing the traits as an indication of narcissism and or sociopathy. Then the third thing I do, which is another reframe, I try to reframe the NT wife's attempts at conflict resolution as manifestations of her love and natural nurturing propensities, instead of viewing her conflict resolution attempts as an indication of a need to manipulate or control, in this case her ASD husband. Then the fourth thing that I try to do, generally speaking, which is another reframe, I reframe the arguments that the two of them have as manifestations of two brains that are wired quite differently, trying to make sense of the relationship problems and the best way to resolve those problems, instead of viewing the arguments as an indication that the couple is incompatible. Hey guys, this is Mark, and a little game of true or false for the neurotypical wives out there trying to understand their autistic husband. So, true or false? Number 1, men on the autism spectrum embrace chain of command. True or false? True. An unstable hierarchy can cause these men considerable anxiety. So, an established chain of command, such as that practiced by the military and many workplaces, gives them a sense of control in an otherwise chaotic world. Number 2, men with ASD have no empathy and are more focused on solutions than feelings. True or false? Answer, true and false. The empathy system of the autistic male brain does respond when someone is stressed or expressing a problem, but the task-oriented fix-it region of his brain quickly takes over. So as a result, these men tend to be more concerned with fixing a problem than showing empathy. Number 3, the ASD man is immature for his age. True. He has a developmental disorder after all. That simply means he's emotionally and socially lagging behind his peers. But even late bloomers develop a significant element of experience and wisdom over time. 4, men with ASD don't show their emotions. False. Men on the autism spectrum have slightly stronger emotional reactions, but only before they are aware of their feelings. Once the emotion reaches consciousness, with the exception of anger, most autistic men adopt a poker face or flat affect. Quick message to neurodiverse couples. Know that each party is describing their truth. It's okay to have more than one way of looking at things, okay? So don't try to correct their filter, in other words, how they interpret events, and don't spend any time whatsoever trying to convince the other person that your perspective is the only correct one. What is the number one problem for people with autism spectrum disorder? Anxiety. What is their number one source of anxiety? Trying to relate to people. This is why there's such a disconnect between NT wives and autistic husbands during toxic relationship stress, and this is also the way each party attempts to deal with the stress. The NT wife will tend to implode, that can look like depression. The ASD husband will tend to explode, and that can look like rage. The NT wife needs to talk about the problems, wants to share and talk about feelings, prefers a connection during crisis. The autistic husband doesn't want to talk about the problems, doesn't want to share emotions, and prefers a disconnection during crisis. The NT wife will want to associate and seek support, while the ASD husband will want to disassociate and have a meltdown or shutdown. Why is there such a stark difference here between the two? The NT wife is highly developed socially and emotionally. The ASD man, not so much. Quick message to neurodiverse couples. If your spouse has to behave in accordance with your expectations, you're in for one long, miserable marriage. So, quick message to neurotypical spouses out there. You're likely to run into 3 important things with your autistic spouse. 1, the need for sameness. 2, impaired prediction skills. 3, deficit with theory of mind skills. So let's look at each of these in turn. The need for sameness is one of the most uniform traits of ASD. Now, neurotypicals can routinely estimate the probabilities of certain events, for example, other people's likely behavior, but people on the autism spectrum don't have the same computational abilities, we'll call it, when it comes to prediction. Repetitive behaviors and insistence on rigid structure have been shown to soothe anxiety produced by unpredictability, even in people without autism. But people on the autism spectrum try very hard to impose structure on an environment that otherwise seems chaotic. Impaired prediction skills also helps to explain why people with ASD are often hypersensitive to sensory stimuli. Now, most neurotypicals are able to become used to ongoing sensory stimuli, for example, background noises, because they can predict that the noise or other stimulus will probably continue, but autistic individuals have much more trouble adjusting. If we were unable to adjust to stimuli, then the world would become overwhelming very quickly. It's like you can't escape the harshness that's falling on your ears or that you're observing. Also, people with ASD often have a reduced ability to understand another person's thoughts, feelings, and motivations, which is a skill known as theory of mind. This could result from an inability to predict another person's behavior based on past interactions. Individuals on the spectrum have difficulty using this type of context and tend to interpret behavior based only on what is happening in that very moment. Hey guys, this is Mark, and I got a quick message to neurotypical spouses. A potential source of sensory overload for a person with ASD level 1 is voice, especially tone of voice. So your autistic spouse may analyze voice tone first and then decode the words used by you later. So any voice inflection by you that remotely conveys a negative attitude, for example, sarcasm, irritation, criticism, and so on, may be detected by your spouse and then taken personally. If your autistic spouse downloads your tone as being negative, it's going to cause a problem, particularly if he's not sure why you are using a particular inflection. He might be thinking, is she upset with me? Did I do something wrong? Why does she sound mad? And so on. And now you get this loop effect that can occur in his thinking process. In other words, he mulls over the comment that you made long after the conversation has ended. And then anxiety, agitation, and fear increase as he attempts to analyze the motive behind what you said. People with ASD are logical thinkers and sometimes overly logical, which means they're overthinking, which means they're overanalyzing. So if you get pushback from your spouse, and it's a mystery to you as why, it's possible that he perceived or downloaded your delivery as critical. Okay, here are some symptoms of ASD level 1 in children. Little attention given to their caregiver, obsession with a particular subject or activity, repetitiveness, sensory difficulties, social problems, emotional immaturity. And guess what? Here are some of the symptoms of ASD level 1 in adults. Little attention given to their spouse, obsession with a particular subject or activity, repetitiveness, sensory difficulties, social problems, emotional immaturity. And as one of my YouTube subscribers said, people intentionally withhold grace from an ASD adult that they would go out of their way to give to an ASD child. Worry is always, 100% of the time, thinking about things you cannot control, but that produces adrenaline. But adrenaline has an addictive nature to it. So in other words, worrying can become an addiction. What's normal for a neurodiverse marriage? It's normal for the NT wife to be stressed because she's not getting her emotional needs met. It's normal for the ASD spouse to be stressed because he has a hard time meeting her emotional needs and keeps getting in trouble for not meeting her needs. What's normal is for the NT wife to be mad because he's not following through. What's normal is for the ASD spouse to be mad because he keeps getting asked to do things he doesn't want to do. What's normal for the NT wife to be sad that she didn't get the marriage that she thought she was signing up for. And it's also normal for the ASD spouse to be sad because he's not getting the marriage that he thought he signed up for. If you had a child with autism, would you ever have the thought, God, this kid is so insensitive, uncaring, selfish, and narcissistic. He doesn't care whether he hurts my feelings or not. No. So why would you have those thoughts about your autistic spouse? Quick message to neurodiverse couples. Trying to get your spouse to change by bitching about how they don't change is a lot like trying to run a marathon while you're smoking a pack of Marlboro. People with autism have alexithymia, and alexithymia is when you're out of touch with how you feel in any particular moment, but emotions are your guidance system. So if you have alexithymia, you don't have a guidance system, and that's why autistic people feel lost most of the time. Hey guys, this is Mark. Click on the join button underneath any of my videos, then click on members only videos, and then click on join. And for $9.99 a month, you'll have access to members only videos, which are excerpts from previous workshops I've conducted for NT partners, ASD partners, and the neurodiverse couple. New videos will be uploaded weekly.